Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. This is a special daily editorial as it's more of a roundtable discussion with Sitka Gold. I am joined right now with Mike Burke, Director and Vice President of Corporate Development at Sitka Gold, as well as Quinton Hennigh, Technical Director of Crescat Capital, who is a strategic shareholder of Sitka. Sitka is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol SIG, on the OTCQB under the symbol SITKF, and the Frankfurt Exchange 1RF. What we're going to do here is more discuss the ongoing exploration work from Sitka Gold at the RC Gold Project in the Yukon in the Tombstone Gold Belt. We'll recap where the company stands in terms of resource base and get Quinton's thoughts on where he sees some of the best opportunities for growth for resources and even in terms of gold grades. So, Mike, I want to start off with you, just bringing everybody quickly up to speed on the asset here. As I said, RC Gold Project in the Yukon, in the well-known Tombstone Gold Belt. The company issued the initial resource on this project in January 2023. Take us through the overall asset and the resource, please, Mike.
Yeah, so we put out that initial resource in January of 2023. So that was based on drilling only a few holes in 2020, the bulk of that drilling in 2021 and 2022. So yeah, the resource was based on 34 holes, a little over 11,000 meters. So since that time in 2023, like we put that resource out in January. So we've had 2 full seasons. So we're still drilling in 2024 right now. But in 2023, we did an additional, we focused on expanding the Blackjack resource. Like there's 2 deposits. They're a couple kilometers apart. The Blackjack is 33 million tons at a grade of 0.83. This is at a 0.25 gram per ton cutoff. And the Eiger is 27 million tons at a half a gram. So you combine those 2, you come up with 61 million tons at a grade of 0.68 for 1.34 million ounces of gold. So the Blackjack is the higher grade of the 2 deposits, and that's what we've been focused on in the last 2 seasons, is defining that resource and expanding it, and that's where we've been quite successful. Last year in 2023, we drilled an additional 12 holes in that Blackjack outside of that resource for 5,200 meters and intersected some pretty great intersections there. You can go to our website. We've got a table of all our intersections. This year, to date to early September, we completed another 16 holes on that Blackjack resource expansion for a little over 8,200 meters. So we've done a significant amount of drilling on expanding that Blackjack resource. The Blackjack resource was based on 22 holes at 7,500 meters. So we've pretty much doubled the amount of drill holes in there. We found the deposit to be very strong to the south and at depth, especially. So that's where we're continuing to focus on drilling this year, as well as stepping out to a couple other areas.
Now, can you just update us on how large these step outs have been, how much you have expanded the overall footprint in that Blackjack zone, and how deep you have drilled currently then?
Yeah, we typically try and step out on 100-meter spacings. As these holes get a little deeper, though, that's a little tricky to do, but nominally 65 meters plus. We just announced the other day the visuals on hole 68. This was a hole that we drilled to test the down plunge extent of the Blackjack. So we needed to step back and kind of drill down the deposit, but we intersected visual gold from 4.5 meters to 680 meters depth, and we ended the hole at 705 meters. So it's a pretty significant hole. Really showed based on visual observations, we saw an increase in the amount of gold at depth, the amount of alteration that we've seen. So we felt it was a pretty important hole to get down and test that downward extent of this. And we're following up with that with the additional holes to try and figure this thing out. I mean, we've been stepping out, expanding it nicely to the south, probably from the 22 resource area. we're a couple hundred meters at least to the south and then down dip quite extensive. So yeah, we're looking forward to figuring out how big this thing is. And the grade, when you look at our table of our released results to date, we're seeing an increase, a general observational increase of grades at depth, and just really strong mineralization as we move to the south. So we're pretty excited about what we're finding there at the Blackjack, but of course, lots of potential elsewhere on the property as well.
Quinton, let's get you in here. Can you just give us a little background on when Crescat got into this stock, how you got introduced to this story, please?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I'm a big fan of these reduced intrusive gold systems in the Yukon. There's a belt that continues really through the Yukon all the way over in Alaska. As you know, we're also interested in the ones in Alaska. But I've been watching this one for a while. The resource that Sitka put out, interesting. It's a bit on the lower grade side, but what really caught my attention was last year. This is in 2023. I think it was around September. They started releasing some holes, and my recollection, there was hole number 47, which was a bit deeper and more towards the southern side of the Blackjack area. And it returned a really impressive intercept, about 125 meters of 2 grams or so. That caught my attention. When I start to see grade in these things, I kind of sit up and take note. The other thing that caught my attention was some of the photos of the core that was coming out, especially in that, in the vicinity of this higher grade material. There's a particular type of intrusive that's very distinctive. It's what we call a crowded porphyry. It's probably similar composition to the rest of the intrusions in the immediate area, but it has a different history to it. It formed crystals at depth, and the crystals, they're kind of surrounded by a ground mass of finer grain material, but it's very distinctive. And I've seen that particular kind of porphyry. Be real clear, this is not a porphyry deposit in the sense of, sensu stricto. This, I'm talking about a magmatic porphyry with crystals in it. I've seen this kind of porphyry form, at the top, like the roof of a very large magma chamber. So it got me to thinking, gee, maybe these guys are kind of right in the very tippy top of a very large reduced intrusive system. And, maybe the low grade that they've hit up to date was actually the kind of the carapace, the top of the system. And that as they're drilling some deeper holes here, hey, man, maybe they're getting into the guts of it. All right. So I think in November of 2023, we talked with SIC, in earnest about taking a position. We didn't take a huge position at that time, but we put some money into the story and we've watched it closely. Sitka has now proceeded to drill more holes in that area because, there's really good results and they're seeing some great visuals. And I think what we're seeing is that kind of thesis that there's, that we're at the top of a much, much bigger intrusive system play out. Hole 68, which Mike just alluded to, not alluded, I mean, they have visuals. They put it out in the news release a few weeks ago with a lot of visible gold. And this is the kind of thing we saw at Snowline, and in the early days, they started seeing, some nice long intercepts with visible gold. So I'm very hopeful that as they drill southward and a bit deeper out of the Blackjack area, that they'll see this thing grow. But it gets more interesting here recently because they've also picked up, they picked up the Clear Creek block. Fortunately, they got that done right before Victoria encountered their problems. But, they've been able to consolidate the property here recently. And what that means is they got the entire target well covered at this point, in my view. Okay, so if you think about this thing, the analogy I use is it's like a cow, and an udder tipped upside down. So you basically have, these small intrusives, apophyses, call it, little fingers poking their way up. And then they lead down into something that's much, much bigger. And, by picking up that Clear Creek block, not only do they have the immediate granite outcrops or granite, visible intrusives, around RC, but they have the ones that extend down into Clear Creek as well. So there's a whole cluster of these things. and they all probably tie together at depth, and that makes a really, really interesting target, because now you got the whole enchilada, you got the whole udder, if you will, the whole cow's udder down there. And I think we could see this thing coalesce into a much larger system. There is historic drilling in the Clear Creek, on the Clear Creek property at several targets, all of which return good gold values. The drill holes are quite shallow. They're historic. I think they date back to, probably 20 years ago or so. But they all hit long intervals, 50, 60, 70 meters. I shouldn't say they all, but most of them hit long intervals of good gold. And, that tells us that this system is continuing on to the Clear Creek ground. So I think they're just beginning. People are going to say, oh, gee, what's the new resource going to be or something? I think we should let Sitka drill this thing and aggressively, okay, like do bigger step outs. And now that they're hitting their stride and they can see, yeah, gee, there's a big whack of gold showing up at depth. Let them do their thing. Drill some big bold step outs and start to show that this thing could be an absolutely killer, reduced intrusive system that is fully preserved at depth. It could be a very large discovery with some luck here. So.
Okay. Hey, thanks for that overview there, Quinton. I will be posting a couple slides from the company's corporate presentation, one of which shows that acquisition of the Clear Creek project and where it's located on that overall project. Now, Quinton, you were talking about deeper holes, bigger step outs, right? Is it all about finding some higher grade material then, or is it going even down that road of what we do see? Well, you even made the comment, snowline, these long intercepts of a few grams per ton of gold.
Yeah, what we're seeing, and even in the assays from recent holes, is that, what started out as long intercepts of 0.x gram is now, morphed into long intervals of 1 gram, now long intervals of 1.x gram, and even long intervals of 2 gram. Okay, so grade is king in these systems. I mean, using grade as a vector is the best way to find gold, obviously. But we're seeing that picture come together. You can see that really easily in their deck. There's one image, it's image and profile of the drilling. It shows the deeper holes, and you can just cast your eye across and see, wow, yeah, I can easily see. I think it's page 13, if I remember, in their deck. You can see the long intervals of higher grade showing up at depth. It's just beginning, guys. There's nothing like that. They've just been nibbling around the edges of it. Now they're getting into it. This thing could be huge. It's got huge potential.
So, Quinton, any questions you have for Mike then in terms of the ongoing exploration on the project?
I guess a few things. I want to know what the ability is to get into the Clear Creek property and keep chasing, this blackjack high grade further south, because there are some fantastic assays in areas, even, just across the border or former border between the two properties there's some nice intervals of high grade, like at the contact zone. I think there was a high grade interval, like 10, 12 meters or something of 20 grams, if I remember right. Can you keep chasing this thing? Is additional permitting needed? What do we need to do to make these bold steps?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Quinton. First off, permitting wise, our property is fully permitted. We have actually 3 permits that cover the consolidated property, and those are all Class 3 and Class 4 permits. They're mining land use permits that allow us to drill, make roads, etc. And the time frame on those they're good for another 8 to 10 years. So we're permitted, no encumbrances there. We can drill year round here. We have done that the last 3 seasons. We've started drilling in February and March. We wanted to do that to kind of demonstrate to the markets that, the infrastructure and the access to our property are quite exceptional. We access the property out of Dawson City. It's only a 2 hours and 15-minute drive, depending on who's driving. But it's a very accessible property. You can fly into Dawson in a jet. In fact, did that just last Friday. We flew in a 737 Air North, great local airline that has jet service to, different parts of Canada. Flew up to Dawson in the jet. That was my First time doing that, 35 minutes out of Whitehorse. So it's a really accessible property. We can drill year round. This year, we're going to drill till the end of October. So that just demonstrates that we can get in good road access to all these areas. So drilling is not a problem to keep on going. Yeah, as you kind of alluded to, the consolidation of the property was really critical for us. We controlled the northern part of the Clear Creek intrusive complex, and the ground that we acquired, Clear Creek South off of Victoria Gold, is the southern part of the Clear Creek intrusive complex. So now we have the entire property. And as you mentioned, the blackjack, we're chasing that down to the south and to depth. It's like a conduit from this large mineralized system. And when you start looking elsewhere, the deposit we have on Eiger, you mentioned the contact zone where, yeah, you were right. There's a 20 grams over 10 meters in an intersection there. The Pukoman is a stock that the contact zone's on the south end of it, but there's a intersection within Pukoman, 1.2 grams over 10 meters. That was drilled by Naranda back in 1992. No follow-up on that. And then the Rosgobble, which is the southernmost and largest intrusive on the property, is similar crowded porphyry like you talked about, Quinton. And that was drilled in 1995 by Kennecott with shallow RC drilling, and that intersected. There's a couple holes there that hit a gram over their entire length, a gram and a bit over 67 meters was the best hole. So there's all these, conduits for this higher grade gold mineralization coming up all over this Clear Creek intrusive complex. And yeah, as we start testing these, I think they help us vector in to that larger prize that Quinton's alluding to. So to be able to control this entire district and explore it holistically, and to be able to, vector in on what's really driving this large mineralized system is a real critical part of our path. So we're very happy to acquire that ground. That was in late June. So we've done a bit of work on that ground, but it really sets the stage for next year.
So, Mike, I guess to follow up on that, will you be allocating any drill meters, any drill holes to this Clear Creek project this year?
Yes, well, we did drill 2 holes on the Rosgobble. I mentioned that. So we completed 2 holes for a little over 700 meters on that target. And we kind of dipped our toes into it this year. So we're kind of doing all our drill planning and looking at all these other targets. As I mentioned, contact. There's another zone, Bearpaw Breccia, Pukoman. So we're looking at our drill planning to really hit the ground running and following up on these next year. But for this year, we really like the Rosgobble target. As I mentioned, that was drilled by Kennecott in 1995. I was the regional geologist for the Yukon Geological Survey up here at that time. So I was up there and saw a bit of the drilling. Kennecott kind of worked in the Yukon pretty intensively from about 1992 to 1995. And then, we get corporate decisions and they kind of left the territory. So that widespread drilling, and you can look at our press release of, I think it was August 19th or something. I can't remember the exact date, shows that drilling that Kennecott did and the widespread gold mineralization that they hit on Rosgobble. So we're pretty excited to get our hands on that target and drill the first 2 diamond drill holes on that target ever. It was just shallow reverse circulation drilling that Kennecott did. So to be able to use a diamond drill and see the core, we do oriented core. So it helps us feed into our geological modeling and the knowledge we've gained from the exploration on the rest of the property to really start figuring out this large mineralized system and its true potential.
Okay. Quinton, anything else that you want to add here? Any other questions for Mike or comments you want to make?
No more questions for Mike, but one of the questions I get from a lot of folks, investors who are going to look at this story, is, about the depth of the higher grade mineralization. There's a concern, going to be in an open pit. And I don't know. The way I look at this, 2-gram rock, and especially in large volumes, that is really idyllic for bulk underground mining. No problem whatsoever. Okay. I remember working with Snowline way back in the early days, of their discovery and talking about, conceptually talking about bulk underground mining if that were needed. To give you a perspective, deposits like Cadia in Australia, this is New South Wales, classic bulk underground mine. It's copper gold. The grade is about 1 gram gold equivalent. Okay, and it does very well. Okay, so a 2 gram gold deposit, especially with great metallurgy and stuff, no problem. Okay, people worry about that all day long. What I worry about is them finding that big deposit. Okay, that's all I want to see.
Okay. Looking for that big deposit. Well, Mike, Quinton, thank you very much for joining me today. This is a more informative discussion on the drill, I guess, potential, discovery potential, growth, resource growth potential at this RC Gold project in the Yukon. Again, we had Mike Burke, the Director and Vice President of Corporate Development at Sitka Gold, as well as Quinton Hennigh, Technical Director of Crescat Capital, who is a strategic shareholder of Sitka Gold. Please, everyone, click that link below this interview, and in the show notes, visit the Sitka Gold website, read over the presentation, send me any questions you have, and hopefully I'll be able to get these guys together, maybe more at the end of this year, the end of the drill program, to discuss some of the results we have seen to date. So, Mike, Quinton, thank you very much for your time today, guys.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah, thanks, Quinton.